Reports are emerging that a rift is widening amid growing tension between Prince Harry and King Charles.
Highgrove had survived storms, scandals, family wounds, and decades of royal silence. But this time, the rupture came from inside the walls. When King Charles made the decision to remove Camilla from all Highgrove events after private, letters to Prince Harry were revealed. The palace did not merely change a schedule, it changed the emotional map of the monarchy forever. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles sat behind the locked study door, with the final page in his hand, and he did not move. The letters had been reviewed in a documented household account prepared for senior palace figures. But seeing the words himself made the matter impossible to soften. Highgrove was not just a royal residence, meaning a home used by members of the royal family. To the king, it was the place where memory felt protected, where pain, loyalty, and family identity still belonged to him. Camilla entered expecting an explanation, but Charles could not meet her eyes. That silence cut deeper than anger. She looked from the papers to his face, searching for sign that the damage could still be contained, while he kept one palm flat against the desk. The Highgrove events mattered because they were not ordinary gatherings. They were the king's personal world made public. Moments where guests saw who still stood closest to his trust. The decision came with brutal calm. Charles removed Camilla from every upcoming Highgrove event after the private letters to Harry were brought before senior palace figures. No shouted order followed. No dramatic speech filled the room. The king lowered the final page, placed it squarely on the desk, and told the aide outside to revise the guest programs. That was when the first quiet blow landed. Camilla's name, once fixed beside his, began to disappear. The letters carried reflections about Harry, loyalty, and family choices never meant to leave the household. They mattered because they touched the monarchy's most fragile wound, the broken line between father and son. They mattered because Highgrove had become the place where private trust met public duty. A senior aide crossed Camilla's name from the list before the household knew why, and that mark felt heavier than any statement. Everyone inside Highgrove sensed the removal was not merely administrative. It was emotional. It was personal. It was the first sign that Charles had drawn a boundary Camilla could not step across. And once her name disappeared from the Highgrove list, the next question became impossible to avoid. Who had the most to lose when those letters came to light? Every royal crisis has papers, offices, and official language. But this one had faces. Charles, wounded and furious. Camilla, stunned by the speed of his decision. Harry, suddenly pulled back into the center of a family storm. William, watching the monarchy's private fractures, threatened to become public judgment. The scandal was not only about letters. It was about trust. Charles carried that trust like a blade pressed beneath his ribs. He had built Highgrove into a private refuge, and now the letters had reached the center of it. Highgrove mattered because it was not merely a house with royal history. It was the king's chosen sanctuary, the place where his causes, memories, and closest loyalties were meant to feel safe. A monarchy, meaning the system where a king or queen stands as the country's symbolic head, survives on control. But Charles knew control had already slipped. Camilla felt the blow before anyone explained its size. She sat alone in a side room, gripping the arm of a chair so tightly that her knuckles seemed to carry the shock her face refused to show. Her role at Highgrove mattered, because every appearance beside Charles had told the world she belonged there. Years of acceptance, partnership, and careful repair had been placed into those events. Now, with one removed name, the Queen Consort understood that legitimacy could be wounded in silence. William waited before entering the king's room. He knew Charles was not only angry, he was protecting a reign already marked by family fractures. The prince chose each word carefully, because concern could sound like pressure, and loyalty could sound like judgment. Harry's name sat between father and son, even before anyone spoke it. That was the danger. The letters did not simply mention the Duke. They reopened a wound that had never truly healed. The palace secretary broke silence through a private recorded account, prepared for the household file. She admitted the letters were not discovered by chance. Someone had brought them forward at a precise moment, close enough to the Highgrove schedule to force action before the next gathering. Charles heard that detail, and went still. Camilla heard it later and understood something colder. This was not only exposure, this was timing. Harry remained far away, yet suddenly he stood at the center of the storm. William understood why that made the crisis dangerous. Camilla understood why it made Charles unreachable. The king understood why the truth now felt less like information and more like a weapon. This was no longer about a revised schedule. It was about who controlled the truth before Charles did. And before the removal, before the silence hardened, one private moment had set everything in motion. The breaking point did not begin with a public statement. It began with a dinner that never reached dessert. A folded letter, carried into a private room before a Highgrove planning meeting, changed the temperature of the household. Later, those present would remember the small details. A glass untouched, a chair pushed back, Charles standing completely still. Charles had entered that evening, expecting tension, but not betrayal. Every Highgrove guest list had started to feel like a test of loyalty, because each name showed who still belonged close to the king's private world. A guest list, in palace terms, is more than a list of people attending an event. It becomes a quiet map of favor, trust, and access. That was why the planning meeting mattered. It was meant to protect unity, not expose the crack beneath it. Camilla had expected to remain central to that calendar. She believed Highgrove still carried her place beside Charles, especially during gatherings tied to legacy, patronage, and family unity. Patronage means the royal support given to charities, causes, and public work. And for the queen consort, those events were proof that years of difficult acceptance had finally turned into permanence. She watched the room carefully, sensing something was wrong before anyone spoke. Then the copied letter arrived. Charles took the page from the aide and read it once. His expression tightened. He read it again, slower this time, and Camilla felt the second reading like a sentence forming in silence. The letter involved Harry, and it suggested that private communication had reached him in a way the king had not authorized. That detail mattered, because father and son already carried an old wound between them. Now the wound had been touched by someone else's hand. The meal was cancelled before the first course could settle into comfort. Charles pushed his chair back, and the sound cut through the room with terrible finality. Camilla stared at him, waiting for anger, waiting for denial, waiting for anything that still sounded like confusion. But the king was no longer confused. He was deciding. A documented household note later recorded that the dinner was stopped immediately after the copied letter was reviewed, making that moment the clear trigger everyone would later return to. A second page made the damage worse. It referenced Highgrove itself, turning the estate from a peaceful setting into the heart of the crisis. Charles understood what that meant. Camilla understood it too. If Highgrove had been named, then his sanctuary had been pulled into the conflict. By the time the king left the room, the first emotional verdict had already been delivered, even if no one had dared to say it aloud. And when Camilla finally demanded to know what Charles intended to do, the confrontation moved from paper to flesh, from hidden words to spoken pain. The confrontation was not loud at first. That made it worse. Charles stood near the desk, one hand resting on the back of a chair, while Camilla faced him from across the room. There were no aides between them, no polished statement, no royal machinery to soften the blow. Only a husband, a wife, and a king drawing a line. Charles had already ordered the Highgrove event list reviewed, saved Sev. And Camilla knew what that meant before he confirmed it. Highgrove, his private country home and emotional refuge, was not just another royal property. It held his memories, his work, and the part of his life he believed still belonged to him. The event list mattered because it showed who was allowed near that private world. Removing the queen consort from it was not a small change. It was a public wound waiting to be noticed. Camilla asked the question first, because silence had become unbearable. "Are you taking Highgrove from me?" Her voice did not break, but the hurt inside it did. Charles looked down at the pen beside the papers, then back at her. He told her, Highgrove had to be protected from the damage now attached to the letters. The letters mattered because they carried Harry's name into a place Charles had tried to keep safe from family war. The Duke was not in the room, but Harry's absence felt almost louder than his presence could have been. Charles set the pen down slowly. That small movement changed everything. Camilla saw it at once. He had passed beyond anger. He had entered resolve. The king was no longer defending a mood. He was defending a boundary. A boundary, in royal life, means more than personal distance. It becomes a rule others must obey, even when no formal order is spoken. And this boundary placed the queen consort outside the gates of his most personal world. Camilla pressed him on who had seen the letters. She wanted names, faces, proof of how far the damage had spread. Charles refused to give her the full circle. That refusal frightened her more than any answer could have done. It meant senior figures knew. It meant staff knew. It meant someone had carried the truth through the household before she could stop it. The king said Harry's name only once, but the room changed when he did. Father and son had become part of the evidence. Camilla left before Charles dismissed her. The door closed with a force neither of them could take back. He stayed standing. She walked away wounded, proud, and shaken. Yet the decision was not Charles's emotion alone. Behind the closed door, a quieter machinery began moving, and power inside the monarchy started choosing sides. A royal decision is rarely only one man's fury. It travels through secretaries, calendars, invitations, security lists, and the silent hands of people trained never to show surprise. But this time, even the professionals looked shaken. Removing Camilla from Highgrove events meant rewriting protocol around a living queen. That was not routine. That was a warning. Charles had spoken, and the household moved because the king's word still carried final weight. Palace staff began separating the Highgrove calendar into family gatherings, patronage receptions, private guests, and public-facing events. A calendar, in royal life, is not simply a list of dates. It is a map of access, showing who stands close to power and who has been quietly moved away from it. That mattered because Highgrove belonged to Charles's private legacy, not only the institution around him. A longtime courtier stared at Camilla's printed name longer than necessary. His hand paused before the pen touched the page, because crossing out the queen consort was not normal palace work. It was emotional surgery. Camilla had stood beside Charles at Highgrove for years, and those appearances had helped show the country that she was not merely tolerated. She was accepted. Removing her now risked turning that hard-won acceptance into a question again. William read the revised list in silence. The prince understood the trap inside the decision. If he supported Charles too strongly, he could look cold toward Camilla. If he pushed back, he could weaken the king at the exact moment the monarchy needed steadiness. William placed the paper down carefully, choosing not to speak until he understood what Charles wanted from him. The future king knew this was not a family disagreement anymore. It was a test of control. A private note beside the schedule changed the meaning of everything. Several events were marked restricted attendance, a phrase used when access is limited to certain approved people for security or sensitivity. That single label showed Camilla's absence was not confusion, illness, or a polite change of plan. It was deliberate exclusion. Charles had not simply delayed her place at Highgrove. He had drawn a line through it. Harry's name made the silence worse. The household learned that he had not been invited into the discussion, even though the letters involved him. That choice created a dangerous emotional vacuum, because the Duke was central to the wound but absent from the room where consequences were being shaped. Charles knew it. William knew it. Camilla would soon know it too. The machinery was moving now. Staff knew. Calendars changed. Invitations shifted. And once the first name was altered, the fallout could no longer be contained inside one room. The first real consequence arrived quietly. No announcement. No shouting. No grand palace statement. Just a table plan. Camilla saw it before anyone explained it to her. Her place, once fixed beside Charles at Highgrove, had been removed. In its absence, the entire scandal became real. A blank space can wound more deeply than a spoken accusation. Camilla stood over the table plan and felt the room tilt beneath her pride. The first altered Highgrove event was a private reception tied to Charles's personal causes, and that made her absence impossible to hide. A private reception, in royal terms, means a smaller gathering where selected guests meet, members of the family, away from full public ceremony. This one mattered because it carried the king's heart. His causes were not decoration. They were part of the life he had built before the crown became his burden. Staff had been told to call it a revised attendance arrangement, but everyone knew those words were a curtain. An attendance arrangement simply means who is expected to appear at an event and where they are placed. Yet this change carried punishment inside it. Camilla touched the empty space where her name should have been. Her face moved from disbelief to humiliation, and then to something sharper. The queen consort understood that she had not only been removed from a table, she had been removed from meaning. Charles stayed in another room, listening. He heard footsteps stop outside his door, and he knew she had seen the truth without him saying it again. That silence mattered, because the king had chosen action over explanation. He had protected Highgrove, but he had wounded the woman who had stood beside him through years of judgment. Success and suffering now sat together in the same decision. He had control of the house, but not peace inside it. A private call went out before the shock could spread further. The instruction was clear. Harry must not be contacted by unauthorized members of the said household until Charles decided what to say. The call mattered because the Duke's name had become the center of a storm he was not controlling. It also proved the letters were no longer just private pain. They had become a security problem, a family problem, and a royal problem all at once. Someone in the staff corridor whispered what others were afraid to say. The letters had not merely embarrassed Charles. They had changed his understanding of loyalty. Camilla heard enough to know the damage had traveled beyond the page. Her shock hardened into resolve. She no longer wanted aids, excuses, or careful phrases. She wanted Charles himself. The scandal had wounded her publicly inside a private house, but the turning point would come only when Charles and Camilla faced each other without titles to hide behind. By the time they met again, the anger had cooled into something more dangerous: clarity. Charles was no longer speaking as a king defending protocol. Camilla was no longer speaking as a queen defending her place. In that room, without aids, without papers, without the performance of monarchy, they were two people, measuring the cost of trust. Charles agreed to see her, after the first revised Highgrove plan had moved through the household. He knew the damage had already left his hands, but he also knew this conversation could not be handled by secretaries. A revised plan means an updated schedule, showing who attends, where they sit, and what role they play. But this one carried more than changes on paper. It carried the quiet message that Camilla had been moved away from the heart of his private world. Camilla entered, without the force she had carried before. She looked tired, but not defeated. The queen consort had spent years standing beside Charles, through public judgment, private doubt, and the slow climb toward acceptance. That mattered, because Highgrove had become proof of that acceptance. When her name vanished from its events, the wound was not only public, it was personal. She asked him the question that had been burning behind every silence. Did he believe she had acted against him? Charles did not answer quickly. That pause hurt more than denial. He told her, with visible pain, that belief was no longer the only issue. The king explained that Highgrove represented the part of his life he could not allow to be used in family conflict. His voice stayed controlled, but the meaning was brutal. The letters had touched Harry, and Harry's name carried years of sorrow between father and son. Now that sorrow had entered the house, Charles wanted to keep safe. Camilla fell silent because she finally understood the shape of the decision. It was not simply punishment meant to shame her. It was a boundary Charles believed he had to keep to protect his reign. A reign means the period when a monarch rules. But for him it also meant the fragile promise that private wounds would not destroy public duty. The queen consort saw then that the removal was not temporary theater. Charles made the consequence plain. Her absence would stand through the full Highgrove season. Not one event, not 1 week. The season. Camilla heard the finality and looked away, wounded by the calmness of it. The private verdict had been spoken behind closed doors. But by morning, the country would see the first public sign that something inside Highgrove had broken. The public did not need a palace confession to understand the message. They saw absence. They saw arrangement. They saw the monarchy's careful choreography suddenly missing one familiar figure. By sunrise, Camilla's removal from Highgrove events was no longer palace knowledge. It was front-page judgment, breakfast table debate, and the image the crown could not easily explain. Charles saw the first reports before the household had finished adjusting to the shock. The official Highgrove attendance list had been released, and Camilla's name was missing from events where she had always been expected. The crown, meaning the monarchy as an institution rather than one single person, now had to carry a silence everyone could read. That mattered because royal absence is never empty. When someone disappears from a list, the country starts asking who made them vanish. Camilla stayed away from the cameras, and that absence became part of the story. She did not deny the removal. She did not appear beside Charles to soften it. The queen consort's silence made her look wounded, but it also made her look dangerously controlled. For years, her public place beside the king had been proof of survival after judgment. Now the missing name suggested that survival could be reversed in a single morning. Charles watched the coverage alone, his jaw tight as commentators repeated Camilla's absence again and again. He understood why the palace response felt too thin. The statement had been brief, controlled, and emotionally empty, describing the change as part of revised arrangements. A palace statement is an official message released to guide public understanding, but this one guided nothing. It only made people listen harder to what had not been said. A major London newspaper captured the moment with brutal force. Its front page showed Highgrove gates beneath the headline, "The empty place beside the king." That image mattered, because it turned a private punishment into a national symbol. The story was no longer hidden in schedules or whispers. It had a shape the public could hold. Charles knew the headline would wound Camilla. Camilla knew the headline would follow her. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered near the railings. Some defended Charles, saying the king had the right to protect his private home after the letters to Harry. Others called the decision brutally personal, arguing that Camilla had been humiliated in front of the country. Buckingham Palace, the monarch's main working headquarters in London, became the place where private pain turned into public argument. Public opinion did not reverse the decision, it sharpened it. Charles remained firm. Camilla remained unseen. Harry's name hovered over every debate like a wound no one could close. And when the noise finally settled, the meaning of the king's decision became impossible to soften. Highgrove had become the place where trust was judged. In the end, the scandal was not defined by the letters alone. It was defined by what Charles did after reading them. He did not shout before the world. He did not explain every wound. He made one decision, placed one boundary, and allowed one absence to speak for the monarchy. Camilla was removed, and Highgrove changed forever. Charles let the decision stand through the full Highgrove season, and that turned one painful act into the defining mark of the crisis. A season, in royal planning, means a set period of events arranged around duties, guests, and public appearances. This mattered because Camilla's parterre's removal was no longer a misunderstanding or a temporary pause. The king had confirmed the consequence, and the queen consort had to live with it. Highgrove became something different after that. It was no longer only the country home Charles loved, or the place where his private passions had grown. It became a protected emotional space, a line around memory, legacy, and control. The king chose that control over comfort, because he believed the letters had crossed into the tomb. One part of his life he could not allow family conflict to damage. Camilla understood the meaning, even when it wounded her. Charles walked alone before the next event, feeling the cost of what he had done with every quiet step. He paused before entering, not because he doubted the decision, but because he knew what it had taken from him. Success had given him authority. Suffering had given that authority a price. The monarch had protected Highgrove, but protection had not brought peace. It had only made the wound cleaner, colder, and impossible to ignore. Camilla accepted the reality in private, not with surrender, with restraint. The queen consort understood that her place beside Charles had limits she could not command, even after years of loyalty, judgment, and survival. That realization hurt, because it stripped away the illusion that love alone could secure every room. Highgrove had answered differently. Trust, not history, had decided who belonged inside its most sacred circle. As Harry remained silent, yet his name still shaped the story. The letters lost their immediate power because Charles's response became larger than the pages themselves. The Duke did not need to act again. His name had already exposed how fragile the hidden bonds of the family remained. Father, son, wife, crown. All of them had been pulled into one final lesson. This moment proved that monarchy survives, not by avoiding pain, but by choosing which pain it can publicly carry. Charles's removal of Camilla from Highgrove events became a final, unmistakable statement. Love may shape a reign, but trust determines who stands inside its most sacred rooms. The door at Highgrove did not close on a schedule. It closed on an illusion, and everyone inside the monarchy heard it. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.